Hey there, welcome to the Boiling Point. I'm your host, Michael Boyle. Everything we do at Altogether Academy is designed to help our community hardwire courage, resilience, contribution, and joy, even if hard times happen. My goal for this podcast is to leave you feeling inspired and empowered with practical, perhaps even profound, ideas and tools to make your life a place worth loving. If you'd like to go deeper and explore a complete and traversable path with maps, tools, instructions, camaraderie, and support, all in one place, you can join the Joyful Excellence Mastermind community, where for a fraction of the cost of typical therapy, you can get so much more. Or you can sign up for our free newsletter, check out our blogs and books, take the 30-day reset from surviving to thriving, all by visiting the Altogether Academy website. Please enjoy this free episode and reach out with any questions or requests for me to speak on certain topics here or to an audience near you. Love to all. Together we thrive. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Boiling Point. This is our third episode, and I am on a slick new microphone. Maybe you can hear the difference. I know that my wife can. And she's a professional musician, so she hooked me up. So today I want to talk about the longevity hack that nobody is talking about. And it's going to take me a second to set it up, but I started thinking about this coming off of a conversation with my brother, and it was a conversation about trauma. And that's a topic that is floated around quite a bit these days, and I have some interesting thoughts about that I'm going to come back to. But first, I'm going to mention a little bit of a science disclaimer, and the science disclaimer is this: is that I think there's something really cool going on that we are able to talk about things in terms of neuroscience and what's going on in our body and in our brain, and that there's good research, and we have different ways of imaging things, and nowadays that we can make some practical connections from what we're learning in science and through imaging and our direct experience of life. But I also think that there's a kind of a disingenuous way that that's used, and it's like it's oversimplified, but also people are just trying to give themselves credibility by saying, oh, well, this increases your dopamine or something like that. And I do that sometimes too, but I attempt to always do it with a caveat and a disclaimer, which is that I am well aware that there is a symphony of things going on in the brain at any given time, and there's really no such thing as a single cause and effect. And so when we're using a term like, saying this boosts your dopamine or something like that, that's a drastic oversimplification. But when it is still a useful thing to do is when it helps us to activate something inside of our lives that produces a specific result that is beneficial. And whether it's dopamine or oxytocin or the amygdala or the hippocampus or fight, flight, or freeze or the survival mode or the thriving mode, we're using these terms somewhat symbolically. And I think that that's a little bit challenging because we're also now borrowing from science, which is really supposed to be about hard facts. But I also think that, maybe a little controversial opinion here, while I love science and I love genuine science, I think that there's tons of science out there that is actually more like a dogmatic religion. The people that are fundamentalists in that religion like to think it is, and they think that there is the only way of knowing is through the scientific method. And they forget that even if we are adhering to the scientific method, what we really are doing is continually exploring the unknown. And the fact is that we don't know a lot more than we do know. And so I'm also aware that things are going to get updated, and some things that I say about, memory science or sleep research or whatever, maybe aren't going to be true in a year. So that's my science disclaimer. Now I'm going to get back to trauma and some of the extremes that we see in trauma. Of course, we have one unhealthy extreme that everybody knows, or at least evolved people to some degree know is unhealthy, and that is the denial or avoidance or minimizing or gaslighting or victim blaming, all that stuff that is prevalent out there around trauma is problematic. And I'm just gonna take for granted that the audience that's listening to this podcast is aware that understanding and respecting trauma is an important part of being a awake and compassionate, empathetic human being. And then, but the other side of the pendulum that I think that, where we've gotten to the point where everything is trauma, and we look at trauma or circumstances as meaning that we must stay and that we are bound to be kind of crippled by circumstances in a certain way, such that we are forever stuck in the symptoms that arise when one experiences trauma. I think that that's also equally problematic, and I think that it's wonderful to have good coping tools, and it's wonderful to have good coping skills and good coping mechanisms along the way, but it's an entire another level or order of being to no longer need the coping skills or tools because you've completely outgrown the neurological or neurochemical or psychological or emotional symptoms or infrastructure that was the problem, and that you are actually literally a new and different person that no longer has that problem is a very real possibility with maps and tools and instructions to get there. And I think that it's important that we know that that we can completely heal pretty much everything, but we won't get into that too much. But certainly anything that is, associated with PTSD or something like that. I am trained as a trauma therapist, and I'm pretty proud that of my work in this arena, and really having a good knack for working with someone that has PTSD in an A to Z fashion and seeing them emerge all the way to a point of being free from any signs or symptoms of trauma and PTSD. And I'm not just talking about doing this in a rinky-dink format with people that haven't been through hard stuff. I'm talking about combat veterans. I'm talking about rape victims. I'm talking about sexual abuse, early childhood sexual abuse. I'm talking about complex trauma. I'm talking about, really difficult things that people have been through, that I've worked with, and that I personally have been through, and that I've worked through in my own life. And so I just want to let people know that it's very important to respect it and to understand that there are things there are forces that are outside of our control that certainly can alter our experience in negative ways that are really, really difficult to overcome. And there also is a path forward. And there is a path forward to not only get better at coping with whatever's going on, but to actually completely outgrow it and to thrive in a way where the problem is no longer a problem. It literally does not exist. And now we are in a category of people that are able to look back upon our experience without a negative emotional charge and say, wow, that sucked, and I wouldn't want to go through that again. And I certainly don't condone any wrongdoing that happened there, but I'm actually somehow grateful that it happened, because I am in love with the person I am today and the life that I'm living today, perhaps even because of that. Okay, so I am splicing in here. This is not an orthodox thing to do with a podcast, but I'm actually doing it on purpose. This is an after-the-fact edit that I'm splicing in, and I'm keeping the old part in because I want to make the distinction. Just had a nice conversation with my wife, and we work together on some of this stuff to just make sure that, sometimes I get on a roll and I say things in a way that aren't exactly the best way to say them. And there are important implications in one of the things that she helped me catch, because she also knows my heart and knows what I really mean. We talk about this stuff a lot. So I do not mean that we become grateful for the trauma. That is, that line of thinking gets down the track of all sorts of victim blaming and shaming and guilt tripping and stuff like that. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that through the work and process of first coming to a deep level of acceptance of difficult, horrible things that have happened, coming to a deep and radical level of acceptance, that becomes the ground from which we can do the work to thrive and heal, such that we can become grateful for our present moment circumstances, grateful for our future, grateful for growth and resilience and strength and contribution and working for justice and etc. And it doesn't mean we ever need to condone or like or permit or say that it was a good thing per se, but there is this sense of that happened, it is over and done, it was awful, it was wrong, I would fight to not let it happen again, I would contribute to the world so that it doesn't happen to others, and I love who I am, I love my life, I love where my life is heading, and for those reasons, I feel grateful. Okay, so that's an important distinction that I wanted to splice in, and now I will just jump back to the original recording. What I'm talking about here with this longevity hack and this conversation on trauma is not only relevant to people that have experienced overt or obvious trauma or who have identified as being traumatized or having been a victim of something or things of that nature. In fact, I do think that the mechanisms of trauma are at play for everyone, and particularly things that are, the conversation that I had with my brother was about the ubiquity and normalization of the experience of what happens when our nervous system is exposed to information about something that we are hardwired to be upset about, want to do something about, to be triggered, quote unquote, triggered by, etc. But yet it's not something that is in our influence. And just to be more obvious about it, just give a recent example in the historical time that we're living in right now is, just a couple weeks ago with the LA fires, right? So, of course, the people that are there in the proximity of the fires and are in real and present danger, that's not who I'm talking about right now. And I much love and respect to those people and certainly understand the incredible layers of difficulty that entails for them. But I'm talking about everyone else now. I'm talking about those of us that hear about that when we're in Boston, Massachusetts. And we hear about that and we see those images on the news, so we are living in a time where we are inundated with exposure to things that are alarming, but yet they are not a life or death threat for us, and or they are not something that we can do anything about. And what ends up happening is that activates the survival parts of our mechanisms, and yet we don't have a reasonable means to be able to discharge that energy either through skillful means and being in a flow state and creatively and resourcefully, working through that situation, or that's the ideal, or even using the survival mode energy, the adrenaline and the survival mode of fight, flight, or freeze to fight our way out of the problem, to run away from the problem, to run away, fight the threat, run from the threat are the evolutionary preferences. And then the last preference evolutionary is that we freeze, is that I can't fight the problem, I can't run away from it, so I'm going to hunker down and I'm going to prepare to get mauled and I'm going to go numb, or I'm going to freeze because I know that there's a part of my brain that knows that the predator that sees motion, and if I'm completely frozen and if I'm completely still, I will be invisible, and if I'm invisible, I will be safe. And so that's the freeze part of it. But the fact of the matter is that we are having this mechanism activated day in and day out. And what ends up happening is that whenever something that is threatening, either a real present moment threat or a perceived threat, the brain does not really differentiate the difference between the two. Those memories, the brain is recording 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And those memories are being stored every single second of the alarm while the alarm system is on. Those memories are being stored in a certain place and in a certain way. I'm going to call that place the amygdala. Again, I'm doing air quotes that you can't see because that is certainly an oversimplification. But they're stored in a certain place in the brain, and the function of this place is to be in a place where they are easily triggerable, because we want to be able to be reminded of something that is dangerous easily and quickly and automatically. So it's stored in a part of the brain that is easy and automatically triggered beneath our conscious mind. What do I mean by that? So it's going to circumvent, or it's going to happen prior to or before our conscious awareness, because we don't want to think, oh no, should I go left or right when the tiger's coming at my throat? If I think, should I go left or should I go right, I'm already eaten. So we want to just act. So that's one characteristic of this part of the brain, is it's reactive, it's reactive. And just to draw a tiny connection, just to draw a tiny connection to how easily, what I'm talking about, this longevity hack, is we are spending so much energy. Survival energy is the most expensive energy that we've got. It is like, it's like putting jet fuel in your Jetta. It is the stuff that enables moms to lift cars off of babies. But when it's activated on a regular day, when it's activated when you're in traffic and someone cuts you off and you are swearing under your breath, or maybe not under your breath, and you're yelling at someone that will never hear you and giving them the finger, and your heart rate is racing, and you are using survival energy for being in traffic. We're using survival energy for doing the dishes. We're using survival energy for getting our kids out of the house to go to school. We're using survival energy day in and day out. And every single time that survival mode is active, we're storing new information in the alarm system so that anything similar to that can trigger it again. And not only similar, but it's actually even more weird than that, because this part of the brain, not only does it store things in a way that is kind of timeless and always ever ready to be triggered, it also breaks experiences down into tiny fragments. Because if you logic with the evolutionary perspective that we want to be able to be triggered by anything that's alarming, because remember, the survival mode's priority is to survive. It doesn't care about happiness. It doesn't care about love. It doesn't care about joy. It doesn't care about creativity. It doesn't care about spontaneity. It doesn't care about, making love. It doesn't care about poetry or art or music or any of that. Its job is to survive. Those other things are wonderful, but they're from a different part of our nervous system. They're from a different part of our being. The survival mode is just interested in surviving. And so it says, I need to be able to be triggered by anything that is threatening. And I need that to be immediate, and I need that to be fast, and I need that to be non-logical, non-rational, instantaneous, okay? But it also says no two situations ever happen alike. So I'm not going to record the whole memory. I'm not going to record it as it actually happened. I'm going to break it down into its component parts. So I'm going to break it down into the heart rate and the pupil dilation and the muscle tension and the fascia and the sounds that I was hearing at the time of that, or the way the sunlight was coming in my eyes, or the temperature or the smell. It's going to break it down into all of these fragments so that any one of the fragments can trip the alarm system. And then what ends up happening, which is really kind of weird, is something called state-dependent triggering, is that So say you have an accident and you're 17 years old and you have some sort of an accident and let's just say it's a car accident, and yet you're 17, you're healthy, you're robust, you weren't hurt at all. There was nothing like quote unquote traumatic about it. You didn't have to go see a therapist, and there was no PTSD symptoms. You just like you weren't really hurt, but at the same time, your alarm system in the moment of the accident was understandably triggered, and so you're recording everything in the part of the brain that I'm talking about. And one of the things that it records is the way the sunlight came in the window at the precise angle that the sunlight came in the window and hit your eye. And then 20 years later, you haven't thought about that accident since. It didn't leave any ramifications. There was no injuries, nothing. You haven't thought about it in literally 20 years. And you're sitting in your office and the sun comes through the window and hits you in that eye in the same way. And then all of a sudden, boom, you're having a panic attack. But here's the thing. Remember, it's stored in a part of the brain that is unconscious and immediate. That one sliver of information triggered the whole panic attack. But that wasn't conscious. You aren't sitting there going, oh, I was just triggered about a memory about that car accident. That sliver of information came in beyond your conscious recollection. And now your nervous system is recording the present moment environment that you're in, and you're starting to associate being at work with anxiety. And you're starting to associate, the smell of the perfume of the person in the cubicle next to you as anxiety. And now you're recording all of those things in the trigger file. So what ends up happening here is that even if nothing overtly, quote unquote, traumatic has happened to us, there is the likelihood that we all have I think of them as like sticky notes, that these things are stored in our brain in such a way that they're like sticky notes that are all over our office and our desk. And it's gotten to the point where we can't even see our computer or our desk or our to-do list or what we want to, and we are constantly being both bombarded by new information that's coming in and also triggers and reminders of alarm, alarm, alarm. And most people are living most of their life in survival mode. And if you think about this, you might, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming to kind of even hear this. And there's so much. How do you can't, but you're right. You're actually onto it. Keep going with that thought, because you cannot resolve each and every one of these patterns and programs and memories. And that's where therapy goes wrong. Let's talk about that accident. Let's try to figure it out. Well, guess what? It's a process of infinite regress. In fact, the more you focus on it, the more you actually create new neural networks, more strengthen the neural networks associated with that. But I can't go into that topic right now. I just have to stick on this one. And so, but the thing is that it's like a game of whack-a-mole. You knock one down, another one pops up. You knock one down, and another one pops up. And so you can't solve the problem from the level where it's at, and you can't fight, flight, or freeze your way out of this. And it's ubiquitous, and everybody's doing it. And this is the reason why you yell at your spouse when the cap is off the toothpaste, that you are using survival energy to react to something that, what is the appropriate response for the cap being off the toothpaste is you put the cap on the toothpaste and you never think about it again. But instead we go into, we bring the past into the present, and we filter the present through the past and say, no, but you know that it's important to me to not have the cap off the toothpaste, and and then we start, and we get in these relationship dynamics where we just escalate and escalate and escalate, and then we actually end up really saying things that are hurtful to each other. And now, because the cap was off the toothpaste, but we take 10 steps of escalation beyond that due to our perceptual filters that are, from stuff that I'm saying is these sticky notes that are not cleaned up or categorized correctly in our brain, then we end up actually saying really hurtful and damaging things to each other. And guess what? That more stuff added to the survival mode network. So, like I said, it can feel kind of overwhelming, except when you realize that there is work to be done, and the work to be done is to provide the conditions where that not only can those fragments be cleared up, and this is the longevity hack that I'm talking about, but so just imagine how much more energy you feel like you would have. Just imagine if you did have a whole office full of sticky notes and to-do lists and alarms and reminders, and you're just overwhelmed. You have 150 emails that you have to answer, and by the way, this is also maybe even potentially your real life circumstances, but just think about it figuratively, and just think about now if all of that stuff just got cleared away. You got a clean inbox, you have your to-do list is done, your desk is clear, your computer's RAM is working fast. You're not spinning the wheel of death because your computer is overloaded, and everything is just now you feel clear, and you feel light, and you feel energetic, and you feel inspired, and you feel creative, and now you can start paying attention to what you want to be paying attention to, which is how do you bring more joy into your life? How do you contribute to the welfare of others? How do you maybe accumulate some more wealth or success, or how do you heal, get some exercise or get out in nature? You can now start focus on thriving because you've cleared the debris that is demanding your attention. So how do we do that? Like I said, you can't go one by one through that process. It would take you forever, and in the process of doing that, you just make more sticky notes. So what do you do? Well, what you do is you recognize that the body knows how to heal. The body knows how to heal. And so the analogy that I use for this is that if you have a cut on your finger, your body knows how to heal that cut, and you trust that. You trust that about your body and your finger, and you even understand that you might have a role to play there. You might wash it off. You might put a little soap and water on it. You might put a Band-Aid on it. Maybe some Neosporin. You might even get stitches. But none of those things heals the cut. Those things facilitate the body's ability to heal itself. The body knows how to heal that cut. And if you really think about it, you don't have to look too far to think about things as being miraculous. As, 1 minute a cut is on your skin, and the next minute your skin looks completely normal. And you didn't make that happen, right? You don't beat your heart, you don't digest your food. Your body actually knows how to do the stuff that it needs to do, but we can play a part in that by facilitating the body's capacity to heal. And so I can clean my cut, I can get stitches if I need to, I can take appropriate care so that my body has an easier capacity to heal. I can also mess with it. I can also worry about my cut and wonder, oh my God, is it ever going to heal? And I can pick the scab and I can itch it, and it can get infected, and a little cut can get so infected that I have to amputate my finger. So I have a role to play in one way or the other. And so what I'm saying is that the nervous system and trauma, there is a role that we can play, and we can create the environment where the nervous system also has its own capacity to heal. There's just so many things that we can do that's one of the things that is cool about the modern world that we're living in. And one of the things that basically has excited me for the last 20 years is research and practical application, and the motto of we can do more than talk about it. We can talk about it too, but we can do much, much, much more than talk about it. We can do the things to physiologically resolve moving the sticky notes into the part of the brain where they no longer are bugging us. And I'm going to call that the hippocampus. And again, I have air quotes going. But this part of the brain that I'm talking about now, when we're in thriving mode, we're also still recording everything, but we're recording things in a different place. We're recording things in the part of the brain that works a little bit more like a filing cabinet. So in your office, you have, instead of all those sticky notes, you now have, and it does another thing, it records things in whole, complete packages. So you have a discrete package of experience, and it's put away in the filing cabinet such that you can still have clarity about what's in front of you in terms of your present life moving forward and the projects that you want to work on today. But you also could go into that filing cabinet, and which is another characteristic of this filing cabinet is that everything is stored in it is chronological, such that you are here in the present moment, and not just your intellectual mind, but your body, your brain knows that happened in the past, and it's filed away someplace. I can go look at it, and I can pull that file up, and I can say, yep, that happened. That either sucked or that was horrible. But what you're going to find is that even with the negative stuff, when it's filed away, there's no longer an overwhelming emotional charge. Sure, maybe you'll think about something, you'll be a little bit sad about it or whatever. You'll recognize, that was a tough time in my life. But generally, the feeling would be like, you know what? It doesn't really grab me, and I can put it back in the file, and I can close the cabinet, and I can get back to present moment living. And that is no longer pushing into my present moment, filtering my experience. Okay? And so that is incredibly liberating. And so why I'm calling it a longevity hack is because, do you realize how much energy you would have? You don't need 10 cups of coffee or Red Bull or, people are so pooped and confused these days. People are exhausted. They're not, because their just nervous system is bombarded with survival information, and then it's activating triggers that are not resolved, and stuff is not categorized in the part of the brain where it no longer bothers us. And this is related to, even something like sleep, this is how one of the ways that it gets worse, but also one of the ways that it can get better is that there's something called a neural sweep that happens in sleep, and it happens in like the first 15 minutes of sleeping, but it only happens if you get into certain brainwave states, and it also only happens if you go to bed around the same time every day, from what researchers are figuring out. So, for example, this neural sweep where your brain goes through and like cleans up like fragments of things that were kind of broken or didn't work or didn't make sense or weren't processed correctly throughout the day, and it goes through and sweeps them. It just like clears them out. But you don't get the neural sweep if had a drink of alcohol that night, or you don't get the neural sweep if you normally go to bed at 10 o'clock, but instead you go to bed at midnight. It happens in the first 15 minutes of sleep when you go to bed consistently at the same time, and otherwise it doesn't happen. So how many people are just living with like years and years and years and years of not having that neural sweep? Okay, well, how is that going to work out? Not very well, So the point is though, that's a relatively easy fix, right? I can, even though you might think, but there's a little bit of this kind of modern, we want to have our cake. No, but I like to be able to stay up late, and I want to be able to watch Netflix until 2 a.m. And I still want to be, I don't want to have to listen to honor circadian rhythms or cycles of nature. And I want to still be happy, and I want to still be healthy. Well, okay. Good luck with that. Because it's a really actually easy thing that you could do. You could just start going to bed at the same time every night, at 10 or 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night, and you'll get this neural sweep. Guess what? And then guess what? You'll also have, if you are getting deep enough sleep that you're going to go into REM, you're going to put therapists out of business, because getting into REM also does this thing that I'm talking about, which is that it recategorizes, it moves stuff from the part of the brain that I'm saying, the amygdala, to the hippocampus. Okay, well, that's wonderful. So that's like 50,000 times better than therapy, and because it just happens automatically. So again, we have the ability to create an environment where thriving happens, where healing happens naturally through our lifestyle choices, through our practices, through training our brain to get into deeper brainwave states, through any number of the tools that we can do that are the equivalent of cleaning the cut, or maybe even giving it stitches, so that the body knows how to heal the cut, so the body is able to do what it knows how to do. The same thing is true for our nervous system. There are so many things that we can do, and It's useful to have kind of an A to Z, system. It's useful to have maps, tools, and instructions. It's useful to have a cohesive system, because a lot of people are on to some of this stuff, but they're listening to it from one Instagram person over here and one YouTube person over there and one podcast that they listen to over here. But it's not a cohesive system, and those things might also all be good in and of themselves, but it can be very helpful to have it all in one package that's designed as interconnected parts to create a cohesive result. So that's a little bit of a not so shameless plug for the Joyful Excellence Mastermind, because there's a whole package of things that are all interrelated about sleep and exercise and nutrition and trauma therapy stuff and breathing practices, and they're all geared towards creating a whole complete result, which is essentially you thriving in a way that, one of the things that we think about, people often think, is they think, I need to heal in order to thrive. And my experience has actually shown me that we need to thrive in order to heal. And if we continually create, not dismissal, not avoidance, not gaslighting the negativity or the trauma or the real hard stuff that happens or the injustice in the world and no, far from it. In fact, I'm saying it's more respectful of that stuff to get yourself in a resourceful state where your body can metabolize it. So I've started to categorize the trauma therapy work that I do as embodied aliveness trauma transformation, EAT. Because when we organize our life and our body and our minds and our posture and our breath in certain ways, we actually activate within us a state of being that metabolizes the trauma. It metabolizes the sticky notes. And it not only, so again, coming back to the longevity hack, not only do we no longer have the energy drain of our just being constantly bombarded and drained and biologically overreacting to life, swearing in traffic, yelling at our spouses, yelling at our kids, and all this stuff, which of course I do also, because I'm not perfect and I'm a work in progress like you are. But when we are dramatically reducing that, we have just because we're no longer losing all that energy, we feel so much more alive and energized. But then you add to it the positive values of being and thriving and pursuing things that are joyful and loving and great and genuinely grateful and all this stuff. Now we've now plugged the leak, but we're also now filling our tank with valuable, delicious, nutritious stuff that also helps the healing of the hard stuff. And we're able to, because we're no longer being distracted by the triggers and the alarms and the survival mode, we're actually able to focus on what we want more of, and what we focus on grows, for better or for worse. And if I'm focused on aliveness and on love and on joy and on creativity, I'm going to get more of that in my life. I'm going to experience more of that in my life. And we start to create a positive upward spiral. And that stuff becomes like a salve to heal the wounds. Okay, so now I'm splicing in again because I want to make another point where I talk about joy as activism. The first point that I want to make about this is I understand, as fully as I can, I understand that it is easier to hold that position, that mindset, that strategy for people who are not as at risk, for people, quote unquote, who have more privileges and opportunities, for someone like myself, say. So I just want to make sure that I'm adding to it the sensitivity that I believe is important for a basic level of empathy and compassion in the world, to recognize that holding the position of joy as activism, albeit one that I have admired in people that are oftentimes at risk, culturally speaking, generationally speaking, I just want to make that distinction. And then the second thing is that I want to actually kind of say in a pretty strong way that actually, if you are not one of the people at risk, so say that you come from a position of privilege, or you live in a place that is not currently being affected by, say, a wildfire or something like that, to bear witness to that through the news and have a level of empathy and compassion for that stirs up some strong emotions is normal, natural, healthy, etc. But it's actually selfish to stay stuck in a state of emotional freakout when you are safe, when you're good, when your community is okay, when you're have plenty of food in your refrigerator, et cetera, et cetera. So it's actually it's actually incumbent upon us to really recognize this thing that I'm saying about is the nervous system threat a perceived threat. Even if it's a real threat somewhere else, it's a perceived threat to me. And that doesn't mean that it's not worthy of attention, compassion, mobilizing resources, solutions, etc. But it is worth it. It is important that we have a strategy. Everybody needs a strategy. And my wife sent me a text message, and she has a really good point. She says, if we're going to choose to consume news, we need to do so consciously, fully aware of the effects that it has on our nervous system, just like we have to be conscious about choosing to consume alcohol or something and knowing that it can be damaging to the body. It's okay to choose that, but know what you're doing. And then also having the tools, because when I say joy as activism, I'm also not talking about pleasure. Joy, the type of joy that I'm talking about, is arrived at through the process of doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, getting engaged in your community, making a positive difference in your life, in your family's life, in your community's life. It is arrived at through engagement. So I'm also not suggesting that we just put our heads in the sand and do not consume any media or anything like that. In fact, I think we need to consume enough media so that we know what's going on and we know where we can make an influence, and we need to consume not too much media that we get overwhelmed and stuck in the freeze mode that I was talking about earlier. But we also have to have skills and tools and strategies to transform when our survival mode is triggered into a more optimal state, not only for our personal well-being, but so that we can metabolize the energy that is being stimulated by the world that we live in such a way that we are able to digest it so that we can become healthier, more vital, stronger, more capable of producing a positive result for the benefit of ourselves, others, and all. That's what I mean by joyful activism. Not happy, or not denial, not avoidance, not pretending it doesn't exist, not just tuning out and staying stuck in my bubble of acquiescence and complacency, but actually living a life of joyful excellence by design means that you do the work to get engaged, become a force for your own well-being and for that of others around you. All right. Hopefully that distinction is helpful, even if it made the podcast a little bit longer. We're going to jump right back in to where we were. So that's what I'm saying. We don't need to heal in order to thrive. We need to thrive in order to heal. We need to stop the bleeding of the constant living our life through survival mode. But then we also add the neurochemistry of the beauty and the joy and the love and the contribution and the participation and the celebration. And I'm not talking about being disconnected from real world stuff that's going on. In fact, this is the only form of activism that I'm into, is just like joy is activism. I want to be so robust and strong and healthy and thriving that I'm able to help, that I'm able to contribute. So that's the conversation, or at least the conversation that I had with my brother that got me thinking about all this stuff. I think I took it a little bit farther than he and I talked about, and so maybe he'll be surprised to hear some of this too. So that's it. I'm gonna wrap it up there. I hope you all are doing well. If you have any questions, let me know. If you have any requests for me to talk about certain things here on the podcast, or even if you want to invite me to speak at a place near you, you're please welcome to reach out anytime. Let's finish with a tool. This is a good tool. This is a tool that we did in the Joyful Excellence Mastermind yesterday. And it's a simple one. It comes from the Heart Math Institute. And so credit there. I am Heart Math certified, and so I feel comfortable sharing this, but check them out and the work that they're doing. It's super, super simple. You just place your hands over your heart. If that feels okay to you, you don't have to do that, but just bring your attention to the energy of your heart. Of course, a lot of you are maybe driving, listening to a podcast, so don't do this if you're driving. But if you're not driving, place your energy, place your awareness, your attention in the sensations in the heart area. I think it helps to put your hands there. Up to you. And just notice. You don't need to try to change anything. You don't need to even try to do anything. Awareness alone will start to shift and downregulate, and you might notice that your breath is slowing down or becoming more full. And just keep your awareness in the heart area. And just consider something that you appreciate. I like to think about appreciation. People talk about gratitude, and gratitude's wonderful, but sometimes we should ourselves about gratitude. Oh, I should feel grateful, and I don't. And then we're in a conflict, and that doesn't work. So I just want to I find that appreciation is gratitude's little cousin. And so I can usually find something that I can appreciate, and it's genuine, it's sincere. And I often say this simply, I'm sitting in a chair right now. I appreciate that. It's better than sitting on the floor. I can appreciate taking a sip of water or drawing a breath of fresh air. So I can find something that I'm just genuinely appreciative of. And I can allow that into my heart. I can feel that. And I can feel the way that organizes my body, my posture, maybe even a smile, my breath. And then, because we have inherently designed in us a desire to benefit the tribe and to be rewarded in a real way, not in a phony way, but in a real way, to be rewarded for lifting others up. Just think about someone else that would benefit from this beneficial energy that you are now generating. Just think about them, and imagine like a birthday candle and making a wish. Blow out the candles. Wish for them to thrive. All right, y'all. Love to all. Together we thrive. Have a beautiful day.